Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodhanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodhanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodhanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Shri Radhe, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Nittai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nittai Gaur Hari Bol. Their Lordship Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Bol. Hare Krishna. So this morning we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 24, Text 4. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Tatrapi adiyabhya niyamo, tatrapi adiyabhya niyamo, vaikhanasa susamate, vaikhanasa susamate, abhada ugratapasi, yatva sva vijaypura, tatrapi adiyabhya niyamo, vaikhanasa susamate, arabhadha ugratapasi, arabhadha ugratapasi, yata sva vijaypura, tatrapi adhi abhaya niyamo, vaikhanasa susamate, vaikhanasa susamate, arabdha ugratapasi, arabdha ugratapasi, yata sva vijaypura, yata sva. Tatra apiyadi niyamo, vaikhanasa susamate, aradha padukratapasi, yatvasa vijayapura, tatra apiyadi niyamo, vaikhanasa susamate, aradha ugratapasi, yatvasva vijayapura, tatra prayadiya niyamo, vaikhanasa susamate, aradha ugratapasi, Yata Svavijaye Pura Tatrati Aptya Niyamo Vaikanalasa Susamate Aradhiya Ugra Tapasi Yatvasva Vijaya Pura. Tatra, there, api, also, abhidanya, severe, niyama, austerities, vaikanasa, rules and regulations of retired life, susamate, perfectly recognized, arbhadha, beginning, ugra, severe, tapasi, austerity, yatha, as much as, svavijaye, in conquering the world, pura, formally. Translation. After retiring from family life, Maharaj Prithu strictly followed the regulations of retired life and underwent severe austerities in the forest. He engaged in these activities as seriously as he had formerly engaged in leading the government and conquering everyone. Purport. His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. As it is necessary for one to become very active in family life, similarly, after retirement from family life, it is necessary to control the mind and senses. This is possible when one engages himself fully in devotional service of the Lord. Actually, the whole purpose of the Vedic system, the Vedic social order, is to enable one to ultimately return home back to Godhead. The Grihastha ashram is a sort of concession, combining sense gratification with the regulative life. It is to enable one to easily retire in the middle of life and engage fully in austerities in order to transcend material sense gratification once and for all. Therefore, in the Vanaprastha stage of life, tapasya or austerity is strongly recommended. Maharaj Prithu followed exactly all the rules of Vanaprastha life, which is technically known as Vikanasa Ashram. The word Vikanasa Susamate is significant because in Vanaprastha life, the regulative principles are also to be strictly followed. In other words, Maharaj Prithu was an ideal character in every sphere of life. Mahajana yena gata sa pataha. One should follow in the footsteps of great personalities. Thus, by following the exemplary character of Maharaj Prithu, one can become perfect in all respects while living this life or while retiring from active life. Thus, after giving up this body, one can become liberated back to Godhead. Translation. After retiring from family life, Maharaj Prithu strictly followed the regulations of retired life and underwent severe austerities in the forest. He engaged in these activities as seriously as he had formerly engaged in leading the government and conquering everyone. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manoblistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupam Kadamayam Dadanti Swapadantikam Vandeyaham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sarvadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padang Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gourange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya evacha Patitanan Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivasadi Shri Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimati Indradumna Swami Iti Namine. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Prashadine Nirvashesha Sunyavadi Paskatyade Satarine. Hare Krishna. Pray for some blessings so that from the Vaishnavas so that I would be able to speak something worthy this morning. So we've been reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, especially the pastime of Maharaj Prithu, and understanding exactly this great personality, and known as the Sakti-Avesh avatar of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that being said, we understand that these personalities are there for a reason, for us to imbibe the mood, the qualities, and use these pastimes to see how we in this material sphere can actually derive some knowledge from their activities. So the verse that we are looking at today is that the life of Maharaj Prithu was so exemplary. And now it's come to a phase where, there's a time in life where we go through different phases. And the Vanaprastha ashram is a life of renunciation. It's a life where we've now moved away from the material responsibilities that come with our progression in age. And Srimad Bhagavatam, in the 12th canto, it is described that these books, the Srimad Bhagavatam, is actually the body of the Supreme Lord. And the 10th canto is a smiling face, that's the bhakti. But the 3rd and 4th cantos are known as the legs, the pillars. And that describes it, what upholds pure bhakti. The 3rd and 4th canto actually addresses the problems of material life. So we all know that when we experience material life, we are inundated with calamities, whether it's natural calamities, it's mind calamities, it's body calamities, everything. There's this material life is there for suffering. Why is it so harsh? Because when we are experiencing that suffering, we come closer to Krishna and go back home, back to Godhead. So 3rd and 4th cantos addresses the suffering in the material world. And here we are reading from the 4th canto. And we talk about things like when we look at some pastimes and we look at the demons like Hiranyakashipu, Hiranyaksha. And when you cannot hold on to your desires, when you are not, your mind is not neutralized in terms of your desires, you become a madman. All you do is focus on achieving that desire. And what happens? You go deeper and deeper and deeper into that mood of planning. How do I get my sense gratification? How am I? So your whole mood, your mind, your thoughts are focused on that. Whereas we forget our goal of life in this material world. And it becomes so difficult to then focus on why we're really here. So this is a symbolic description. When we look at, like the demons that are described, like Hiranyakashipu, Hiranyaksha, they've become so fixated on on just achieving their desire, that no matter what happens, what's the consequence, their mind is fixated. And this is a symbolic representation of what control of desires can actually do to you. Become a madman or a madwoman, because your mind is encapsulated in material sense gratification. So there's this greed of sense desire. There's this greed of material desires that become deeper and deeper and deeper. And when these desires are not controlled, it is described that we become atheists. Why is that? Because we believe that we are the controllers. There's no God. I'm the controller of everything. What my actions are will happen. And what happens there is that when you do something to get your material sense gratification, it doesn't work out, I'll make another plan. And when that doesn't work out, you're going to get deeper into it. It's going to spiral out. And eventually you're going to feel, I'm the controller of the world. I'm the controller of my world. And you're going to move further and further away from the Supreme Person. So the fourth canto is explaining the religious way of doing things, right? How we should be living our lives. And this is very interesting because the Lord becomes, when you depend on the Lord, He becomes a mechanism to fulfill those desires. So you're not moving away from Him, you're moving closer to Him. And all the pious activities that you do, your mind becomes very clear, your thoughts. As Maharaj Prithu here, he underwent severe austerities in the forest, moving away from exactly the material sense of doing everything in the Grihastha ashram. Now, this is very interesting because Srila Prabhupada says here in the very first line of this purport, as it is necessary for one to become very active in family life, similarly, after retirement from family life, it is necessary to control the mind and senses. So what's the parallel here? When we are active in Grihastha ashram, in family life, we are active, we're doing things, we're going out there, we're working, we're paying the bills, we're taking care of family, we're taking care of responsibility. Now when we talk about retirement, often in the material sense we say we look forward to our retirement. At what age? How much money are we going to get? What are we going to do? We're going to travel, we're going to relax, we're going to just have a good life now, we've worked so hard. Right, it's our time to retire. But Srila Prabhupada says here, just with the active spirit of the family life and responsibility, the same vigor we should have when we are now retiring. So when we're retiring, not in the material sense of how much of money we're going to get upon 63 or 65 or 55, right, depending, but it's now retiring in that vigor of getting closer to Krishna. Right? And in that same spirit, that same active mood, not to become relaxed, but to use that same activity to become, somebody who's responsible, somebody who's very regulated in their spiritual life. This retirement that Maharaj Prithu describes here of going into the forest gives us the opportunity to take away from the pressure of the material sense of those roles and responsibilities we had in family life. Now we put that same energy in moving closer to our devotional service, our mind and our senses. Prabhupada mentions these two words, mind and senses being very regulated. And once there's a regulation, then nothing affects you. You become equipoised. So whatever calamity that comes your way, you are neutral. You know that happiness, when there's happiness, there'll be sadness. When there's sadness, there's happiness. So when you are in that mood, you will be able to, their Lordship Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Ki Jai. So when you are in that mood of selflessness to the Lord, when you are regulated in terms of your mind and senses, it becomes very easy for you to focus on what's necessary. So Srila Prabhupada explains in Canto 3, Lord Kapila Dev actually says that the mind is a special device. The mind is a very, very special device. And this is the Rajaguna comes up with several, the mind of this, the Rajaguna phase comes up with very special plans. And Srila Prabhupada jokes about it. And he says that, now we have so many committees, and many of these committees are planning committees, strategic planning, if you want to take it a level further, sitting caucus. There's a planning meeting going on. How are we going to plan this? How are we going to do this? How are we going to execute this in the material sense? The mind is also this planning device. We have plans going on over and over on repeat. And when those plans are taken over by material sense gratification, we become so in that mood of I am the controller of everything. And what happens? Lord Kapila Dev then explains the mind of the mood of, or the mode of rajas, of passion, right? When we are passionate, there's one plan after the other. And what can the Lord do? What can the Lord do? He gives in to our material desires. And when we have those plans, we want more. Sometimes when somebody passes away and it's maybe a young person, and I'm sure we've experienced this as well, and they say, oh, he had so many hopes. He had such a bright future. He had so many dreams, it was unfulfilled. And what happens? Because that desire is there, the Lord gives you another birth to fulfill those material desires. The Lord's kind to us. Sometimes when we pray for things, I've seen this in my own life. Sometimes when you pray to Krishna, you want something, and when Krishna gives it to you, I mean, you don't demand from him, but you have it in your heart, right? And Krishna gives it to you. And then the way he gives it to you, it's like, oh gosh, come Krishna, you could have been a little kinder to me in that sense, right? But then when you step back and you think, but that was a desire in your heart. And Krishna's fulfilled it, but the consequence of it is not very much what you thought it would be. I see many smiling faces, so you identify. So that's what happens in terms of when we become so fixated on our material desires, on achieving those hopes and dreams. At the moment of death, we're holding on. We are asking the doctors, we are seeking how much can't we have just a few. I need to do one or two more things. Things are not done yet. I've got to finish off certain things. And then Krishna fulfills those desires. He says, you want to do that, I'll give you another birth. And what happens? Material life is then just full of suffering. So Maharaj Prithu here, he is the perfect example. If we follow the proper sadhana and we live life based on the rules and regulation as prescribed, then material desires diminish. There's nothing wrong with material desires, but spiritual desires need to be far more powerful than those material desires. We are living in the material world. We are here, therefore we have these different ashrams, starting off with the Brahmachari ashram. And that ashram is such where devotees are studying scripture. Life is regulated. You wake up at a certain time in the morning. You know your routine. And sometimes it is said, it is also Mahatma Prabhu, when he was speaking on this verse in one of his classes, he was laughing. And he said sometimes the brahmacharis in that ashram are so fixated in learning verses, do they even understand it? But they churn it out, right? You have to learn your verses, you have to learn the translation, but do you even understand it? That's a brahmachari ashram. Then you move on, it's a very varnashram dharma, the system. You move on to that grihastha life where, as Srila Prabhupada says here in the purport, that it's a little bit of a concession where you are able to give in. The grihastha ashram is a sort of concession combining sense gratification with a regulative life. So you then try and strike that balance. It's difficult to strike that balance though, because there's so many demands of the material world. But if you live that life of regulation, you follow the rules of what Krishna has prescribed, the regulative principles, then that balance comes about. Then we move on to where Maharaj Prithu is here, the Vanaprastha stage. And that phase is going, as we see, he goes into the forest. Now, it is also described that our forest that we look at is Sri Vrindavan Dham. You perform these austerities in Sri Vrindavan Dham. And in that mood, you go into this ashram. And where you say that I am not going to actually move from Grihastha ashram because I failed at it and I'm going to Vanaprastha. There's no such thing. In the early days, actually, Mahatma Prabhu also shares a few letters that devotees had written to Srila Prabhupada in the early days. And those letters were such that sometimes they were Grihastha devotees who had written to Srila Prabhupada who requested that they move on to the sannyas order. And Srila Prabhupada's secretary used to read those letters, open the letter and read to Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada used to ask, who's it from? And then the secretary would say, okay, this letter is from this devotee. And Srila Prabhupada would say either, okay, go ahead, continue, or he'd say nonsense, depending on who the devotee was. So what used to happen back in the day, and we'd have to put it in context, is that this International Society for Krishna Consciousness was just starting off. And they needed preachers, Srila Prabhupada needed men who would take the leadership on. So therefore, the role of sannyas was really sought after at that time. But when a devotee got married, and they entered the Grihastha ashram, and then they realized, no, this is not for me. They wrote to Srila Prabhupada and they said, no, we want to move on now. We're done with Grihastha life. We want to take renunciation. We want to become a sannyas. And Prabhupada was very clear to say, if you fail, in inverted commas, in one ashram, it doesn't mean you hop to the next one. You live your life of responsibility. You follow through with the Grihastha ashram. And you live a life of rules and regulations. So you do not fail in one ashram and then hop over to the next. So when you're a brahmachari now, you're tired of being brahmachari, whatever. Now let me try Grihastha life. Okay, I'm done with Grihastha life. Let me go now to another renounced phase. That doesn't happen. So Maharaj Prithu gives us this clear indication, and Srila Prabhupada was very, very stern and strict about that we should not use these Varan ashram system as a system of just hopping from one phase to another. So here also we find that when we explain this austerities, here we talk about going to the forest, we talk about going to Sri Vrindavan Dham, performing austerities, regulating the mind and the senses, so we are away from the material realm in terms of living life on demand, watching your clock, where you have to be, what you have to do. But Mahatma Prabhu says that our current austerity is actually the consciousness of sitting and being present when we chant the holy name. Now, he's done several japa workshops across the world. And when he was unpacking this verse and looking at what are we in the current times that we are living in, what is our austerity? Our austerity is controlling the mind when we are chanting our japa. Step number 1. Leave alone renouncing, going to the forest, going there performing austerities. That is good if you are regulated already. So the first step for us is actually regulating our mind, our senses, our consciousness when we are chanting our japa, to be fully absorbed in the chanting, to be present, to be intentional. That would be our first step of tapasya, of austerity. And that can be done in any phase of life. Whether we brahmachari, we grihastha, we vanaprastha, we sannyas. So that can be ongoing, because if we don't have a taste for the chanting of the holy name, it becomes extremely difficult, it becomes mechanical. So when that's in itself for us in this time of life, 2025, that in itself is an austerity. So if we can take those small steps to perfect those kind of austerities in our daily life, become regulated in what we do, especially in our chanting, then we would actually win in terms of then going to Vanaprastha stage, then giving up the material attachments. Because once we have the taste for chanting, automatically Krishna is kind. He will give us that, he'll take the material desires away, and the spiritual desires will become stronger. So in this life, on the Vanaprastha life, it is gradually winding down of moving away from the material realm of being supplying your family, taking care of your family, and moving away to another phase of life. But at the same time, it's moving with that same vigor, that same purpose. Now, when I was thinking about this, and I thought, how many of us would really reach that stage of moving away from the attachments of our family? I know a few of us in the room are blessed to be there, but how many of us would actually have that ability to live that life of carefree attachment, of saying, this is my time? Already it's so difficult for us to say, this is my japa time. The japa time is in between. You know, I've got this, as Srila Prabhupada laughs about planning meetings. We've got this meeting, we've got that to do, and I've got to fit in my japa somewhere, right? So our rules and regulations is all already off balance. So in any phase of this life, if we can then become very, very regulated in terms of whether it's brahmachari, whether it's grihastha, whether it's vanaprastha or sannyas, if we have those rules and regulations, it becomes so much easier for the mind and senses to be regulated throughout the day. And that is one battle every one of us really, really has challenges with. None of us can escape. Leave alone Maharaj Prithu going to the forest. At least he's been surrounded. He's been surrounded. Even as we read further, we see what austerities he actually undertakes to control the mind and senses. So as much as he was the king, and he did all his duties with great vigor and great energy, so too is he taking that great vigor and great energy in now developing further his spiritual life. Now today, how do we do that in terms of living right here in Chatsworth or wherever we may be? And step number one is the regulation when we chant. That mind being very focused. Letting go of the material desires in that period of time, in that short period of time, to give yourself, I call it time blocking. I call it time blocking in a sense where you block off this time of an hour to say, devices away, everything away, this is my focus and this is my intention. Just 1 hour, and 60 minutes doesn't become too difficult when you break it down like that. Actually, it's exam season now, mid-year exam, and we were at home, grihastha life. We were looking at the time, and my daughter said, I've got 10 minutes, and before she knew it, and she said, but now I've only got 8 minutes. 2 minutes has already passed. And she couldn't believe it, because she puts a timer on. And then she says, okay, I've got 10 minutes to do this, and before she says, but where did the 2 minutes go? And that's how quickly time passes. And sometimes we get so involved in conversation. We get so involved in things that time passes and we don't even realize, especially when it comes to social media nowadays. Isn't it easy to scroll? It's so easy to just scroll and half an hour's passed. But if we time block and say we are going to be regulated, Srila Prabhupada's given us the perfect system of how to manage our time, especially in the morning. And if we follow that, then the rest of the day becomes very easy to follow suit. And living in the ashram space makes it easier for us, right? That is one of the comforts and that safe space where you can associate with devotees, where you can use the space as your own forest of austerity if you choose for it to be. And that exactly is the choice that we make. Do we choose to use these spaces as our space of growth, as using our Sangha, the devotees around us, to speak words of Krishna, to speak words of leaning on each other as brothers and sisters to develop our Krishna consciousness, or are we using it as another material platform? So perhaps it is not as, for us right now, many of us are in different phases of life where we are unable to do these things of going to the forest and performing these tapasya and austerities. But actually, at the end of it all, that is where we should be aiming at, whichever phase of our life we're in. Having the mind and senses regulated is the first step. And by doing that is being very intentional when it comes to our chanting of our japa. So one of the books that I was reading, and I love this book here, it's by Devaki Devi, who was with us, I think, last year. And one of the things that this book here, The False Ego, and we're so attached to designation, we're so attached to title, we're so attached to this false ego that Maharaj Prithu, being a king and doing whatever he was doing so well, he left it. He left everything and said, it is now my time to go and perform these austerities. And here Devaki Devi speaks of so nicely about giving up control. And she says, one of our strongest propensities in this material world is our desire to control. And we were speaking about that earlier, that material desire, where it takes over, it becomes so strong that we forget Krishna as the supreme person. We become atheists, as Srila Prabhupada says, because we want to take over this material world. We want to take over, we want to control. So Devaki also speaks of, we see ourselves as a supreme controller of situations around us, of other people, of our life, and certainly of our body. In old age, we will have to restrict ourselves in our activities as time goes by. It is humbling to accept the fact that our energy level decreases, and we may not any longer be able to do certain activities in which we were engaging with great pleasure 6 months earlier. In this way, we have gradually let go of external activities and achievements and turned towards internal endeavor. This is Krishna's perfect arrangement. As a rule, we tend to give much more attention to external successes in life. We look externally. How do we define success? Each one of us here have our own definition of success. And if I ask you to think about that for a moment, it would be different for you than it is for me, because of our life's experience, right? What we've experienced in life. So success for some may be just sitting here this morning. If you've got health challenges, just getting out of bed and being here. For some, it could be having a huge bank account, just signing off that contract. That may be success. But if we look internally, what is our success internally? Because we look so much externally. Because they give us recognition and ego satisfaction, external success. And so we tend to neglect our internal life. In old age, Krishna gives us an affectionate and merciful push to make a shift towards internals, since that will be the most helpful to us in preparing for our final exam of meeting death. This last phase of life, which should be spent as a vanaprastha, is meant to be dedicated towards deepening our internal life in Krishna consciousness, centered on Shravanam Kirtanam, intensifying such aspects of spiritual practice which give the finishing touches to our devotional service, so we can prepare ourselves to remember Krishna alone at the time of death and go back home, back to Godhead. So and she explains here that, this stage of life, as Maharaj Prithu shows us, it should be winding down. But when I was reflecting and I was thinking, how is it that, as I said, sometimes we are unable to get to that phase for various reasons, right? Of complete letting go and saying, I'm going to the forest. How can we make our life present but detached at the same time? Right? How can we be present, fulfill our duties, but have the same amount of detachment so that our internal journey is strong? That we are here in the material sense, but we are also fulfilling our roles and responsibilities, but doing it in a manner that is regulated enough, where our material desires are weaker than our spiritual desires. Number one, we said, was chanting. Number two is also letting go of any attachment of control. Understanding that Krishna is the Supreme Person, and not understanding that theoretically, but understanding that in practice. I spent quite a lot of time with Her Grace Nitai Sevani Devi when she was here over our Festival of Chariots. And it was wonderful, to see this living in action. To see how she had just managed her time in devotion. And sometimes I'd ask her a question, and it was one question that she said many people ask her around the world. She is not attached to the outcome. She says, well, there were some things that we were talking about and discussing, and it was even in her Grihastha life, it was, okay, Mataji, are you ready to take your lunch? And she'd say, let me check with Prabhu. Is he ready first? If he's ready, we'll have lunch. If not, I'll wait. It was that sort of synergy that I found, and I actually asked her, I said, how are you so patient? How are you so, aren't you tired now? Don't you want to have something to eat? Don't you want to take prasad? She says, no, but I'm just here. I'm here as a servant of Krishna. If devotees want to talk to me, I'll make myself available. And that was her mood. Her mood was such, and it was not forced. You can see when something is forced. But it comes naturally. It comes naturally because you are living this life every day. So when we try day one, we do that time blocking, and we say we've got 60 minutes for our japa, we've got 60 minutes to just be renounced, to be focused. Yes, I'm here, I've got my duties, I've got my responsibilities, but I'm taking the 60 minutes now for myself to do the internal work. I am in my mind, Manasa, I am going to the forest of Vrindavan. I am performing these austerities as Maharaj Prithu did. He physically went and performed some extreme austerities, right? Body, mind, consciousness. That was what he shows us to do. But in our current day and age, how we are living today, we still are able to do that by offering our mind and senses to Krishna as soon as we start our day. As soon as we start our day. And whether we're heading to work, whether we're a brahmachari ashram, and I spent quite a lot of time, actually I spent a good 10 days at the Govardhan Eco Village with some very learned brahmacharis, and they recite these verses, they know the translation, they're so well trained under His Holiness Radhanath Swami, and then we see this in action. We see in Chaupati, we see how these brahmachari ashrams are taken to a different level of training, and these brahmacharis then go out and start preaching. you know, and these are the systems that are in place, this Varun Ashram system, which is the perfection of life if we follow it as prescribed. So coming back to the Brahmachari ashram, we can still be very regulated in our thoughts. That's how it should be. Grihastha ashram, as Maharaj Prithu, the perfection, he did everything with vigor. He was the ideal king, and he did it perfectly. He fulfilled that with perfection. Shakti-avesh avatar, to show us how to live. Then it comes to where we at now in the Bhagavatam. And again, with the same vigor, with the same energy, not that I'm retired, I'm going to just meditate. You know, it was the same consciousness and spirit. Did he now say, I'm going to level up my internal consciousness? And those material desires are going to be let go. The spiritual desires are going to come up. So too can we, in whatever space we at, and I've been thinking so deeply about this, that yes, we have those, especially in the Grihastha phase of life, where I'm at, and many of us are at different phases, where we can still be present, we can still do our necessary duties, but we can also have that strong attachment to the holy name, that strong attachment to spiritual desires. And when that attachment is there sincerely, Krishna will help us fulfill it. We can create that mood in our mind, in our consciousness. Nobody can take that mood away from you. It's your internal mood, as we sing, our internal work that needs to be done. So we take these lessons from Maharaj Prithu and we see how we can use it in our own life. And to conclude, I will just sum up here by the bottom, the last few lines of the purport by Prabhupada. Thus, by following the exemplary character of Maharaj Prithu, one can become perfect in all respects while living this life or while retiring from active life. Thus, after giving up this body, one can become liberated and go back to Godhead. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you. Haribol. There any questions? I was joking with Rukmini and I said, I have no. Oh, there is a question. Yes. I hope it's a comment, Ranga.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So thank you very much for a wonderful class. I was just reflecting that, you also basically retired from teaching now, and you're following suit. Basically, you're practicing what you preach. In that, you're trying to renounce family life in one sense, now that your kids have grown up, so we should actually spell this out to the congregation, what's actually meant to, to do. So you're like an ideal householder, to, in this phase now of vanaprastha, giving up family life. So yes, we should, people out there should actually take this as an example and basically do like this, follow brahmachari, grihastha, vanaprastha, sannyas. Well, gurus cannot be sannyasis, but at least they can be gurus to other ladies like this. So in this way, you're setting a very nice example. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Ranga Devi. With the blessings of their lordships and the Vaishnavas, I find myself fortunate that I could be in your association this morning. I was actually driving here and experiencing the morning traffic heading down to Chatsworth, which I don't normally do, right? Because going to work is the opposite direction. And I was being grateful. I was being grateful that Krishna's been kind to me. The devotees have been, we can only do these things with the mercy of Guru and Vaishnavas. So I'm happy to be able to serve in a bit, to be able to take association as I wouldn't normally be able to, learn more. And I think in the ideal phase of life, if we can do these things gradually, we could progress nicely. Thank you so much, Ranga. Hare Krishna. Any other thoughts or comments? That's it. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.